The Narentines was a South Slavic tribe that occupied an area of southern Dalmatia centered at the river Neretva, active in the 9th and 10th centuries, noted as pirates on the Adriatic, named Narentani in Venetian sources. Greek sources call them paganoi, pagans, as they were for long pagan. In a time when neighboring tribes were Christianized, the tribe were fierce enemies of the Republic of Venice, having attacked Venetian merchants and clergy passing on the Adriatic, and even raided close to Venice itself, as well as defeated the Doge several times. Venetian Narentine peace treaties did not last long, as the Narentines quickly returned to piracy. They were finally defeated in a Venetian crackdown at the turn of the 10th century and disappeared from sources by the 11th century. Terminology. The word Narentine is a demonym derived from the local Neretva River. In the 10th century, de administrando imperio of Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus, the tribe is called Paganoi, and the polity Pagania in Greek, while also noting that in Latin they're called Arantanoi and the polity Aranta. They are described as Serbs, descended from the unbaptized Serbs. The Pagani are so called because they did not accept baptism at the time when all the Serbs were baptized. Venetian sources used the geographical term Narentani and Slavic ethnonym to refer to the people. In Serbo-Croatian, the tribal name is rendered as Naretiani and Pagani, while the polity mostly as Pagania. Geography and economy. In Dai's chapter's story of the province of Dalmatia and of the Pagani, also called Arantani, and of the country they now dwell in, the geography of Pagania is described. Pagania had the counties of Rastitsa, Mokros and Dalin. Rastitsa in Mokros lay by the coast, and had galleys, while Dalin was distant from the sea and was based on agriculture. Pagania had the inhabited cities of Mokron, Berulia, Ostrog and Slavnetsa, and the large islands of Korkra, Kaika with a city, Meleta, Malaziati, Fera and Bratsis. The Pagani raised flocks on the islands. Islands in the vicinity but not part of Pagania were Kora, Is and Lastabon. Croatia was situated to the west, and Zacumlia to the east. Serbia was situated inland to the north, behind Pagania, Zacumlia, Travunia and Dioclea, and bordered to Croatia on the Zantina River. History. The Sclavony overwhelmed the Balkans in the 6th century. The Dai speaks of the Narentines as descended from the unbaptized Serbs that settled Dalmatia under the protection of Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, and that the land of the Narentines had earlier been devastated by the Avars. In 639 AD, Nerona, until then a flourishing Roman city, was destroyed by a horde of Avars and Slavists. A few years later, Slavic tribes took control of the lower Neretva. The Slavs built a new town on the ruins of Nerona, and erected a monument to the Slavic gods Vetovad on the ruins of Roman temples. According to Evans, Narentia became a stronghold for pagans in the Balkans, similarly to Balto-Slavs in Rugan. In 642, Slavs invaded southern Italy and attacked Siponto by ship from the Dalmatian coast. Slavic naval raids on the Adriatic increased and it became unsafe for travel. The first conflicts between the Venetians and Narentines came immediately before 830, around which time the first peace agreement was signed between the two. Narentine Slavs sent envoys to Doge Giovanni I Participazio. P. Skog believes this period also being the first contact between Venice and the Middle Dalmatian islands. According to Safari, by the beginning of the 9th century their power had increased so much that Doge Giovanni I attacked them and then offered them peace. The Republic of Venice was de facto subordinate to the Byzantine Empire, a period in which Venice expanded its trade relations towards the east. In the first half of the 9th century, Byzantium was struck by internal unrest, while the Bulgars and Arabs strengthened themselves thanks to this. Arabs took Crete in 825, Palermo in 831, Taranto in 839. Then, after destroying the Venetian navy by 840, they roamed freely in the Adriatic. In 841, Arabic ships attacked Adriatic cities and reached a confluence of the Padua River, while smaller contingents attacked Budva, Rosa and Lower Kota. In 842, the Arabs conquered Bari, and in 846 reached Rome itself. The Venetian navy, obliged to defend the Byzantine Adriatic, were occupied almost fully with battles with the Arabs. The Byzantine navy rarely appeared, and with small numbers of ships. This, and Arab harassment, gave the Slavic pirates around the Neretva upswing to develop the ship capabilities. When the Venetian navy was in Sicilian waters as guards in 827 to 828, the Narentines received momentum. When the Venetian navy returned, they calmed down. Venetian chronicles speak of a Narentine leader having been baptized in Venice. For greater security for the latter, however, the Narentines are unsteady and deceptive as the sea. As soon as events in Venice or the Adriatic worsened, the Narentines continued the piracy. One of their attacks in 834 to 835, when they robbed and killed some Venetian merchants returning from Benevento, caused great resentment against them in Venice. In order to stop these assaults, the Venetians undertook a large expedition against the Dalmatian Slavic pirates in 839. Doge Pietro Tredornico sent warships against the Slavic lands. According to F. Cizek, Doge Pietro ordered an attack on the Narentines in the spring of 839. According to V. Clark, Tredornico had first defeated and made peace with the Croats under Mislav, then proceeded to attack the Narentine Islands and make peace with Narentine leader Drozeaco. There are no information on the fights that year, but it is known that peace was concluded with Croats and a part of the Narentines. Venetian chronicler John the Deacon records a renewal of the peace treaty signed by Drozeaco. The peace with the Narentines did not last long, perhaps as the Narentines signed it to avoid danger, or more likely because it was not concluded with all but a tribe or clan of the Narentines. In 840 the Venetians attacked Narentine leader Ludislav, ending in failure. Ludislav, possibly a successor or co-ruler of Drozeaco, defeated the Venetian Doge and killed hundreds of his men. According to Clark, it was the Narentines who broke the peace. It seems that Narentine piracy even reached Istria by February 840. The 840 Venetian Frankish treaty included common fight against Slavic tribes. After two defeats to the Venetian navy by the Arabs immediately after, the Venetians were unable to enter new fights with the Dalmatian Slavists. In 846 the Narentines reached close to Venice itself, and raided nearby Kur. The arrival of Basil I to the Byzantine throne led to important changes in Byzantium energetic. He managed to enter closer ties with Bulgars, and even the distant Croats, and protected the empire well. When Ragusa asked for the emperor's help against the threat of the Saracens, he dispatched his strong navy into the Adriatic. Byzantine Admiral Nikitas Urifas took up closer contacts with the Serb tribes around Ragusa, the Zakamlans, Travunians and Konovians, and invited them to jointly combat the Saracens, both on land and sea. In 869, only Slavic tribes of southern Dalmatia were called to cooperate. To the north, the Croats and Dalmatians entered relations with Italian King Louis at the dismay of the Byzantines, when some Slavs in March 870 kidnapped the Bishop of Rome's emissaries returning home from the Fourth Council in Constantinople. The Byzantines used this as a good pretext to attack and force them into submission. The Dai mentions that the Narentines were called pagans because they did not accept baptism in the time when all Serbs were baptized, which is placed during Basil's rule. The Narentines are not mentioned in relation to the Byzantine military expedition on Bari dispatched by Basil I, in which other Dalmatian Slavs participated. The Croats, Serbs, Zaclumians, Travunians, Konavlians, Ragusans, with all the men of the towns of Dalmatia, crossed over the sea to Langobardia and took Bari. Basil returned Dalmatia under Byzantine rule by 878, and a large part of Dalmatia was put under the Patriarchate of Constantinople. The Dai claims that the Dalmatian Slavs asked Basil I to baptize them. The Christianization of the Narentines seems to have failed. According to Evans, the Narentines remained pagan until 873, when Byzantine Admiral Euryphus persuaded them to accept baptism, while Doge also I Participazio and his son Giovanni II Participazio made peace and an alliance with the Croats after 876. The Venetians were still at war with the Narentines. In 880 the Venetian-Frankish treaty was renewed. In 887 Doge Pietro I Candiano sent troops against the Narentine Slavs, landing at the Slavic hill, putting the Slavs to flight. The Narentines were defeated in a battle in August 887 at Makarska, and the 5 ships were destroyed with axes. With help from neighbors, the Narentines decisively defeated the Venetian navy on the 18th of September 887, with the Doge killed in action and his body left laying. For this time until 948 the Venetian chronicles do not mention conflicts with the Croats, which would mean that the Venetians offered peace and paid tribute to the Croats. Pagania was by the reign of Serbian ruler Peter Gojniković part of the Serbian Principality. Peter and the Byzantine commander of Dirician Leo Rabdouchos met in Narentine lands regarding an alliance against the Bulgars. Michael of Zahumlia, who had been pushed out from Zahumlia to the neighboring islands by Peter, informed the Bulgars about these negotiations. In 917 Peter was tricked by the Bulgars, who then annexed Serbia in 924 to 927, until Kaslav returned to Serbia and rebuilt the state. In Byzantine alliance, Kaslav's state included Pagania. In the 940s, the islands of Brac and Hvar, which had earlier become part of the Croatian kingdom, seceded during Ban Pribiana's rebellion and rejoined the Narentine province. The Narentines took advantage of the internal unrest in Croatia after the death of Peter Kresimir and took the islands of Kazavas and Lastovo. In 948 the Narentines were at war with Venetian Doge Pietro III Candiano, who sent 33 war galleys under Urso Badavario and Pietro Rosolo. The Narentines managed to defend themselves. The Venetians were forced to pay tribute to the Narentines for safe sea passage. Serbia collapsed after Kaslav's death in California, 960, into smaller units. In 997, the Narentines increased raids against Latin and Venetian towns, and they had close ties with Croat ruler Svetoslav Shurnia, who were at the time fought as two brothers over the throne. This relation caused the Latin Dalmatian towns and Venice to turn against Svetoslav. In 998, the Republic of Venice, under the Byzantine Emperor, exerted control over the Byzantine Dalmatian towns. Dalmatian Croatia was in civil war. The Narentines were semi-independent, raiding the Adriatic, particularly against Venice. As Venice gained authority in Dalmatia, some Dalmatian towns that fell threatened allied with the Narentines. The Venetians then intervened and defeated the Narentines and their Croatian allies decisively on sea, resulting in Narentine power decline. On the 9th of May 1000, Venetian Doge Pietro II also decided to conquer the allied Croats and Narentines, protecting the interests of the trading colonies and the Latin Dalmatian citizenry. Without difficulty, he struck the entire eastern Adriatic coastline, with only the Narentines offering him some resistance. As a counterattack, the Narentines kidnapped 40 of the former citizens of Zara and stole a transport of goods from Apulia. On the way home, Pietro II dispatched 10 ships that surprised them between Lastovo and Caca and took them as prisoners to Trogir. Narentine emissaries came to the Doge's temporary residence at Split to beg for the release of the prisoners. They guaranteed that the Narentine prince himself would show up with his men and renounce the old rights to tax the Venetians for free passage. All prisoners were allowed to return to their homes, except for 6 that were kept as hostages. Lastovo and Corcula continued to oppose the Venetians. Corcula was conquered by Pietro II and Lastovo fell too after long bloody fights. As Lastovo was very infamous in the Venetian world for being a pirate haven, the Doge ordered it to be evacuated in order to be razed. After the denizens of Lastovo refused to concur, the Venetians attacked and razed it to the ground. Leaders Drosaico, Venetian chronicler John the Deacon records a renewal of Venetian-Narentine peace treaty signed by Drosaico. Luditus Sclavis, possibly a successor or co-ruler of Drosaico, defeated the Venetian Doge and killed hundreds of his men. Unius Clavis and Diogenes were, according to Johann Christian van Engel, the leaders of the raid on Curl. Safaric included the note in Sloane's case Nosti and rendered the names as Unislaw and Dioda. Berigoi mentioned in a 1050 charter of the Benedictine monastery of St. Mary on the island of Tremiti as a king of the coastal people, then as a judge of the coastal people. Legacy. There is a historical festival called Matrimonio in Venice commemorating the victory of the Narentines, held on Candlemas. Historiography. A strange republic of Servian pirates arose at the mouth of the Narenta. In the 10th century description of Dalmatia by Constantine Porphyrogenitus, this region is called Pagania, for the fact that its inhabitants had only accepted Christianity about 890 or 250 years later than the other Slavicists. Pagani, or Narentani, defeated a Venetian fleet in 887, and for more than a century exacted tribute from Venice itself. In 998 they were finally crushed by the Doge Pietro Orsolino II, who assumed the title Duke of Dalmatia, though without prejudice to Byzantine suzerainty. Further information on them is found in De Administrando Imperio of Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus and Chronicon Venetime Gradense of John the Deacon. The Narentines are regarded as part of both Serb and Croat medieval history. There has been disputes in historiography on the ethnic designation of the tribe, whether it, apart from being Slavic, was to be described as Serbo-Croat. Thedai calls them a Serb tribe, while Venetian Chronicles calls them Slavs. Jiricek treated them as a distinct South Slavic tribe. The Chronicle of John the Deacon distinguished between the Narentines in Dalmatian Croatia. In the Chronicle of the Priest of Duclia, a work written by a Catholic bishop likely for a Croatian ruler in California, 1300–10, largely discredited in historiography, the southern Dalmatian principalities are referred to as part of Red Croatia. Johannes Lucius called them Serbs, as did Croatian historians F. Ratsky and S. Lubick. F. Cizik said that the Neretva population were ever and always fully identical to the Croat, including also its Charkavian dialect. Some Croatian historians claim that the Narentines were under Croat rule in the second half of the 9th century. Safarik viewed that the first information on Serbs in history were from events regarding the Narentines. V. Korovic treats the Narentines as the first of the Serb tribes to take the initiative of fighting, not for defense and tribal organization, but for the liberty of selfish desires and security raids. Annotations